good. An audience with hands. Happy Wednesday, everyone. In Chicago last night, former President Biden gave his first speech since leaving office. As a result, millions of Americans now believe in life after death. He was speaking to a group of advocates for the disabled who were surprised to learn the keynote speaker was one of their clients. During his speech, he referred to black children as colored kids, which I heard was an improvement over his first draft. You know, but what's nice, after the speech, he was greeted by a throng of well-wishers. According to a new poll, California voters are not excited about Kamala Harris running for governor. To improve her support among Hispanics, she's been working with a consultant. The world's first sperm race, in which human sperm cells will compete on a microscopic track, will take place in Los Angeles. Yeah, the winner goes home on this sock. Looks familiar, huh, Joe? The UK's top court ruled that so-called trans women do not fit the legal definition of woman. This from a legal system full of men that wear wigs. At least they can pass. New York AG Letitia James is under investigation for falsifying records to get loans. Funny, isn't this exactly the thing she tried to prosecute Trump for? Makes me wonder, what if she banged Stormy Daniels? On one loan, Letitia reportedly listed her father as her husband. Hey, lady, stay in your lane, said one woman. Finally, California is proposing a new bill that allows homeless college kids to sleep in their cars on campus. I highly recommend it, said one man. Homeless Don. All right, so apparently this entire week has been about one guy. You know, the Maryland dad with 3 kids, who also happens to be an illegal, likely a gang member and perhaps a domestic abuser. His name, don't know, don't care. All right, I got a family, a new baby, a dog, a job, a neighborhood plagued by violent creeps. I don't need this. Here's what I do know. He's here illegally, and like Joe Biden after a 3-bean burrito, he has to go. But faced with an adult solution to a real problem, the media yet again creates an imaginary concern from the same playbook that they always use. You worry about voter fraud, they say voter ID is racist. You worry about government fraud and abuse, they claim Doge is cutting Social Security. You worry about crime, they claim all cops are racist. You worry about medical monsters experimenting on children, they claim trans kids are killing themselves. Once you see this grift, you can't unsee it. When we try to solve a real problem, they create the imaginary concern to manipulate public opinion. But this time, it's not working. Overwhelmingly, the American public favored deportations of illegals, no matter what bull you conjure up. So kids or not, he's illegal, he goes. And here's why. Let's go all the way back to a few months ago. Remember those migrants coming in by the millions? Migrants who we had no intel on, who we didn't vet, didn't investigate, who we identified only enough to write checks to? We knew less about those young men than the ones I meet at truck stops. Planes arriving in the middle of the night. New programs created by executive order, supposedly by a guy who couldn't find his way off the stage without a zip line. And all it took to get refugee status was saying, I hate tortillas. But now it's time for them to leave. Suddenly, we're all social workers. Oh, he has kids. He works so hard. Well, pal, maybe don't pick a country you're illegally in to start a family. It sounds harsh. Now, when it's compared to the arrogant indifference of Democrats when women got raped and murdered by illegals that they let in. Not to mention the relentless violence in cities they ignored for years because it was under their watch. And now a couple of Democrat congressmen say they want to fly to El Salvador to retrieve this scum. who is an El Salvador citizen, by the way, not an American one. Cory Booker wants to visit the prisoners in El Salvador. And that makes sense. It's the only place where people can't get up and leave when he starts yapping. But do the Dems realize they have no authority in El Salvador? El Salvador is a little different than the green room at The View. For one, the tattoos on The View were branded by farmers. Yeah. Okay. They're used to it.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
But really, the Maryland dad is just the latest awful prop for the latest awful narrative, a diversion to make you forget what the Biden regime chose to import with the media cheering them on. The crime, the fentanyl, the overwhelmed schools, the raped and murdered women. Joe did a killer job, and by that, I mean he actually got people killed. The media wants us crying over this dude. Sorry, I'm saving my outrage for the Americans that Biden, Harris, and Mayorkas burdened, hurt, and betrayed. And yet the press is losing it like someone just said Brian Stelter farted. The mainstream media has run more stories on this jackass than they did on the victims of the crime wave created by the open border they created. Look, it's simple. Deportation is the corrective to importation. When they came in, our terrible leaders didn't ask questions. Instead, they cared more about border agents getting whipped or whipping migrants. So now, when it's time to go, I'm not wasting mental shelf space on their concerns. Oh, but we're not sure he's MS-13. That sounds like a lot of the guys Kat used to date. But I repeat, I don't care. And don't get me started on, but isn't there a process? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's called hit the road. You can argue the legal all you want. Have at it, Clarence Darrow, whatever his name is. But all of that is downstream from the initial massive injustice, a Democrat government that deliberately flooded the country with illegals. If they didn't create this mess, we wouldn't have to clean it up. It's that simple. If you want to argue the legal implications, call 1-800-I-DON'T-GIVE-A. Let's welcome tonight's guest. When he calls the suicide hotline, they let it go to voicemail. Comedian Joe Mackey. He punctures left-wing fibs and runs circles around libs. Former Trump advisor Steve Cortez. She's got it all. Looks, brains, and both kidneys. The Federalist correspondent Brianna Lyman. And like shuffleboard, women love to do him on cruise ships. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former WWE world champion Tyrus. Joe, you look great. You look like the hip reverend at a school for wayward kids. Yeah. Are you undercover tonight?
No, Greg. I have a meeting on a yacht.
Oh, really?
I will say due process is important, but it's also important for the plaintiffs. Mm-hmm. Now, here's a person that came to the country in 2011, spent 14 years and multiple children later. He's still here. It just, that reminds me of college. But I'll say this. Look, Trump did screw up here. This was, they deported him to the one country he couldn't be deported to. They should send him somewhere worse, like France. But whenever you make a mistake, no matter how minor, you should try to fix it. Like one time, I damaged my brother's car, but I made sure that my dad paid for it.
Well done, Joe. A lot of lessons in that response. Steve, I have a real problem with the concern over one illegal alien somehow taking preference over the indifference that they shared for actual citizens.
Right. Can I ask you first, though, from your monologue, who hates tortillas?
That's my point.
I mean, as the lone Latino here, the token Latino, for the ensemble.
But you know, that was how easy it was to claim asylum.
Right, of course, right? Any ridiculous lie coached by American NGOs. Look, this guy is an absolute scumbag, right? And we know that because he beats women. If you beat women, you're a scumbag. But here's the point, too, Greg. It wouldn't matter if he were a wonderful person. He still trespassed. He still broke and entered into our homeland and was here illegally. So I don't care if he was Ward Cleaver, if he was that good of a husband and father, he has to go.
Do we remember Ward Cleaver, right? That's for all of our viewers over 90. The great late Hugh Beaumont.
Yep.
It's sad that I know that name. He was a great dad, though.
Amazing.
He really was. Brianna, you have no idea.
I have no idea who these people are.
It's okay. If it wasn't on Good Times, I didn't watch either.
Why is it that when the Democrats are presented two choices, they always pick the wrong one? They always side with the bad guy and then try to convince everybody, no, actually, they're misunderstood. Why don't you just go with your gut and you go like, I know this guy's bad?
Because why would they have to? They have the weight of the propaganda press behind them. This guy's apparently a Maryland father. You would never glean from these headlines that he was here legally, should have been deported in 2018, and apparently beat his wife. But they do that on purpose. They want to blur the line between an illegal alien and a citizen to delegitimize these efforts to get rid of all the illegal aliens.
Yeah, it's amazing, though, that it's all because of Trump. They have to pick they'll always pick the worst person because at least it's not Trump. I love, Tyrus, that this guy Van Halen, what's his name, Van Hollen? He's no Van Halen.
No.
He's not even
Sammy
Crocus.
Hagar Van Halen.
Yes, he's saying. I was gonna say the guy from Extreme was in.
Even worse Van Halen.
Yes.
Gary Chacon did an admirable job.
Thank you. By the way, you're right. Where was I? Now, he flies out. He thinks he's doing like this amazing thing in the air. All the news comes out. This dude's a wife beater.
Yeah.
And Cory Booker's like, thank God I didn't drive to the airport yet.
You know, the funny part is that he's going to El Salvador to tell them that they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then you're going to have to call the White House to get your jailed ass home. That ought to be a fun. I would love to be let me answer the phones that night. Hello? Oh, I'll have to put you on hold.
Yeah.
That's the problem with dumb people.
Yeah.
No, seriously. It's like they're dumb, and we know they're dumb. But the problem is they don't know they're dumb because they're dumb.
Yes. Well, and by the way, speaking of that lack of intelligence, they're playing in Trump's lane here, right? I mean, this issue, by far, is his strongest issue. All the polling shows us that, right? It was the foundational pillar of his election last November. Why do they continue to play in his lane, right, where he's strongest? Which just shows you how
Well, it goes back to, and I've been on this conspiracy thing about why they're so upset about Doge, and I think this guy falls into it. As the corruption for the last 4 years, there was a shadow group running the government. There was a small percentage that kept picking things that didn't make sense to us. There were 20% on everything because that's where the embezzlement comes from and the money comes from. I think they're trying to make an example out of him. So when it comes to them, when we see congressmen being arrested for embezzlement, they're going to say, "Oh, they're deporting us. They're taking us like they did. They're disappearing." No, you got a warrant, bruh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But again, it goes back to my first point. Dumb.
Yeah, I resent the way the media is trying to force feed you their priorities. It's not even their priority. They don't care about this guy either. But they're basically pushing this so hard on you to push all your other concerns out. What about this guy? Forget about the victims of crime. Forget about the fact that downtown we had a young woman just knifed with a broken bottle. That's not your concern. It's this guy, this gang member. And that drives me crazy.
Who has a great gang member lawyer, by the way.
Yes.
Again, dumb.
Ooh, gangbanger lawyer. That sounds like a great show.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.